are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, January 15th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about the Steelers. Should they move on from Mike Tomlin? With the most recent playoff loss to the Ravens, we'll get into that discussion. I'll give you my thoughts, what the Steelers should do. In the second part of the show, we'll get into something that I haven't gotten to yet, and that is one of the college football playoff games, the other college football playoff game between Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State winning that, so we'll get into that, the specifics of it. We'll also talk about Jordan Love and Justin Herbert, two quarterbacks that did not have a good postseason. They just played in one playoff game. So we'll talk about those two guys and the doubts that are being put on those two guys and whether I think it's an overreaction or not. Then we'll also get into talking about, we'll continue talking about Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, their teams, but the other teams that lost over the weekend as well and what they have to do to get back to the postseason next year. So we'll get into that, and then we will get into my power rankings, the top 5 teams going into the divisional round. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Mike Tomlin. Should the Steelers move off of Mike Tomlin? Now, this was going to be a topic of discussion if the Steelers were to lose, because the Steelers have been early playoff exits for some time now. They have not won a playoff game since 2016, the 2016-2017 playoffs when they beat the Chiefs. And Steeler fans are fed up. They are fed up with the Steelers and just how they get to the postseason and they're not able to move forward. And going into the game on Saturday, you kind of figured that it was going to be more of the same. The Ravens were the much better team. And even as the game progressed, early on, the Steelers looked like they just didn't want to play. Then they finally woke up in the second half and showed you a little bit of a pulse, but it was too little too late. And many people want Mike Tomlin gone. Now, I understand where they're coming from. I really do. Because it's been the same thing for years now. And they want change. Now, I don't think all the blame should be on Tomlin, because the Steelers have not found a franchise quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger retired. They drafted Kenny Pickett. That didn't work out well. I mean, last year, you had Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph all start games for you, and you still made the playoffs. There was a year where Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. That was the 2019 season. You had Mason Rudolph start some games. You had Devlin Hodges start some games, and somehow they didn't finish with a losing record. So, that shows how good of a coach Mike Tomlin is. But you need to find a franchise quarterback. Because in a conference like the AFC, you need to have a Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. You need to have a guy like that can compete with those guys. Because the Steelers don't have that. And Russell Wilson was decent this year. We all kind of rolled our eyes when they made the change from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson, but it ended up panning out for them until the end of the year. But Russell Wilson is not what he used to be. He's just not. So the Steelers need to figure it out. The problem is they finished 9-8, 10-7. They don't have the ability. I mean, they have the ability if they want to give up assets, but they don't have the ability, I guess, to take one of those top quarterbacks because they are never in a position to do that. And when you look at the free agent market and maybe if they were to trade for someone, there's no one really out there that you could bring in that is to that level of the quarterbacks that I just mentioned. Now, I know you guys know I'm a big Aaron Rodgers guy, but Aaron Rodgers is either going to retire or if he comes back, he's not the same player he once was. Now, if you were getting prime Aaron Rodgers or prime Russell Wilson, then yeah, then you have a quarterback that can compete with the guys, the top four that I just mentioned. But there's no one out there. So it's really going to come down to the Steelers being able to find that quarterback in the draft. And I don't know what they're going to do with this upcoming draft. I mean, obviously, we'll talk more about the Steelers and what they have to do. But it's just, they need the quarterback, and they just need more explosiveness on this offense. They just don't have a ton of that. The running game, Najee Harris probably going to be leaving in free agency. And, other than George Pickens, there's really no weapons that scare you. And does George Pickens even scare you? George Pickens, I brought him up the other day. He's an elite talent, but is he an elite player? I don't know if I could say that. And I like the weapons on this team. Pickens is good. Calvin Austin showed you some potential this year. Pat Freiermuth's a good tight end. I like Jaylen Warren. And, Najee did rush for over 1,000 yards, although Troy Aikman dismissed that when they did the Bengals-Steelers game, just because now with the added games and all that and what have you. But they do have good players on this offense. It's just they need elite players on this offense. And I don't think you could look at the guys that they have and say there's any elite weapons. So, yeah, that is, I mean, we'll talk more about that when we get into the later segment. But, yeah, it's just Steeler fans want change. They expect better results. And I did bring this up the other day. It's kind of like the Yankees, because the Yankees have a standard of championship or bust. Now, I don't have that mindset anymore, but a lot of Yankee fans still do, and they have wanted Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman, the general manager, fired for years because they haven't won a championship since 2009. Now, they did get back to the World Series in the fall, but they ended up losing in 5 games to the Dodgers. I don't like talking about it, but that's what happened. Now, the Steelers, they just flat out haven't won. Now, at least the Yankees got to a World Series. The Steelers haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. It's the same thing over and over again. So that's where the frustration comes from. Now, there are some things, like if you go back over the course of Tomlin's career, there are a lot of games where the Steelers play down to their competition. The one that always comes to mind to me for some reason, now you could bring up the playoff game against the Jaguars. Now, the Jaguars were a good team that year, but there's no reason why the Steelers couldn't beat Blake Bortles in that playoff game. They gave up 45 points. Now, there was a defensive touchdown in that game. I remember that. But, I mean, it's not like Jacksonville's offense was elite. Jacksonville's defense was elite. But, you had Ben Roethlisberger, you had Antonio Brown, you had Le'Veon Bell. That offense should have been able to, well, I mean, they did put up 42 points. It really, you got to put the blame on the defense. The defense just could not stop anything. And now, the defense has improved over the years, but the offense has gotten worse. The elite level talent's just not there on offense. But the one regular season game that always comes to mind is 2014, when they lost to Mike Glennon and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was Mike Evans' rookie season. They lost to them in Pittsburgh. That's just one. I don't know, that's just one that always sticks out to me for some reason. But that is a prime example of Tomlin teams playing down to their competition, or they're just not prepared. There are a lot of times where, over the course of Tomlin's career, where the team is just not prepared. So, I get it from that perspective why they just want Tomlin gone. And they want to win playoff games. They are used to winning championships. And it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, especially with how the conference is constructed with all these young elite quarterbacks. And the Steelers don't have one. But should they get rid of Mike Tomlin? Right now, no, because who are you bringing in? Who are you going to bring in that is going to be as good as him? I mean, there's coaches out there, and I know we've had the conversation in our production meeting, and Matt, one of our sports writers, is a Steelers fan, and he said he'd be willing to, not be good for a couple of years, I guess tank, get a good quarterback, and, maybe you get the right head coach, whoever that could be, whether it's a coordinator or someone like that. But on the other hand, be careful what you wish for, because you could end up being like the Jets and the Giants, where you just cannot find the right head coach and general manager. And then you're even worse. Then you go from being, mediocre to bad. You don't want that. So you do have to look at it from that perspective too, is be careful what you wish for. But I think for right now, you keep Tomlin, and let's see what they do. They have the most expensive defense in the league too. That's another problem. We got to kind of balance it out a little bit. Get some more talent on offense. They need it. And we'll get in, like I said, we'll get into that later in the show when I talk about, the Steelers and all the other teams as well. But yeah, it's just another frustrating year for the Steelers, and they were 10-3. They were 10-3. They were looking great, but then they finished out the season losing 5 straight games. It's not what you want. And they were 10-3, and you still end up finishing with the same record as you did last year, where they won 3 straight to make the playoffs, and they got knocked out by the Bills. So, yeah, we'll see what happens, but yeah, Tomlin's not going anywhere. And the other thing, too, is, like Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman, more so Brian Cashman, but if Mike Tomlin was out there, if the Steelers let him go and he was out there, teams would immediately gravitate towards him to try to get him to take their job, their head coaching position, if it's open. He's won a Super Bowl, even though it was a long time ago. He's never finished with a losing season. They're going to look at that and say, we want that guy to change the culture. So, it's the same thing with Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman. If Brian Cashman was out there, Yankee fans want him fired. If he was out there, teams would immediately be lining up to try to bring him in because of the resume. And I get it. But the Steelers, they have a different standard than a lot of the other teams in the NFL. Many people say they're entitled. I get it. So, yeah, the Steelers are still going to keep Tomlin. I believe they should. See how next year goes. I mean, if they end up having a terrible year, which I don't think they will, it might be more of the same, they're going to continue to keep him. And the Steelers are an organization that doesn't fire their coaches. They tend to not do that. Now, they did that last year because fans were begging for them to fire Matt Canada, and now they brought in Arthur Smith, and, fans are still not happy. So, we'll see. But I get it. I get it from their perspective, but I'm of the mindset you keep Tomlin around, and, let's see what they do going into the next season. So we're going to take our first break of the show now, and then when we come back, we will recap the Ohio State-Texas game, because that was something I haven't done yet, and we'll talk about, a little bit about the matchup now that sets up the national championship game. It'll be Notre Dame against Ohio State. So we'll talk about all that when we come back. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to now recap the Ohio State-Texas game from Friday. Ohio State will now be advancing to the national championship game to take on Notre Dame. And this was an entertaining game. You know, the playoffs for the NFL were pretty lackluster. The games were not very good, other than the Commanders-Buccaneers game, which I was hoping Baker Mayfield would win that. But unfortunately, that did not happen. But that was still a good game. For the two college football playoff games, those were two good games. Now, the Penn State Notre Dame game was you would probably lean towards that being the better of the two, but they still had their signature moments. And I do have a graphic to be the background of this segment here. Well, really the foreground, and that is the Jack Sawyer scoop and score for the touchdown late in the game, but. Both teams, both offenses struggled at certain points during the game. This was kind of a defensive game at certain points. Ohio State got off to a roaring start like they have these entire playoffs. They went right down the field on their first drive, and you thought, here we go again. This is gonna be another blowout, isn't it? Because Texas turned it over on downs to start the game. They went for it on 4th and 3, and they weren't able to convert. And yeah, Ohio State went 10 plays, 64 yards down the field, and Quinshon Junkins from 9 yards out scored a touchdown to make it 7-0 Buckeyes. But yeah, it took a little bit, well, really most of the first half for Texas to get something going, and then they finally got on the board towards the end of the first half. They went for it on 4th and 1. They had Arch Manning come into the game, and he was able to scramble for a first down. And it looked like maybe he might have fumbled on the play, but they ruled that he was down, and Texas picked up the first down. They got down to the Ohio State 18, and Jaden Blue, who had a couple of receiving touchdowns in this game, he caught the first touchdown. It was pretty much the same play. It was kind of a wheel route, and that led to a touchdown for Texas, and it happened later on in the game as well. This was an 18-yard touchdown, and yeah, so that tied the game. So then Ohio State, you got 29 seconds left. You could try to get into field goal range at least. And just, I don't know what Texas defense is doing on this play, but, they set up a screen to Henderson, the other running back, Travion Henderson, and he takes it to the house. So Ohio State goes into the half up 14-7. And this happened in AT&T Stadium. And it kind of reminded me of the play from when the Chiefs were playing the Cowboys. This was like 8 years ago, almost. And that was when, it was before the end of the first half. This was when Alex Smith was the starting quarterback. And he just threw a little dump off to Tyreek Hill. And he had blockers ahead of him. And he was able to weave his way through and score a touchdown. It kind of reminded me of that. I mean, similar plays. But, yeah, and that's what happened when they... in the Cowboys Stadium. Those two plays happened in the Cowboys Stadium. So I thought that was funny there. So, yeah, the Buckeyes were up 14-7 going into the half. But then they get the ball to start the second half, and Will Howard, this was one of his lone mistakes of the night, and that was the interception. But Texas didn't turn that into points. They didn't do anything with it. So, no harm, no foul there. Ohio State then punted on their next drive, and then Texas, they went 12 plays, 72 yards. Quinn Ewers started to get into a little bit of a rhythm. And it was the same play. Wheel route to Blue, 26 yards on 3rd and 7, and that tied the game. Now, there were more punts in the third quarter there. So we went into the fourth quarter. Ohio State did go up 21-14. They went 13 plays, 88 yards. And Will Howard picked up a 4th and 2. That was a crucial play in the game. And he kind of pulled a Daniel Jones where, there was all green grass in front of him, and the turf monster got him. The turf monster tackled him. And that was for 18 yards. So that got them down to the Texas 16. And they eventually got down to the Texas 1. And Junkins scored his second touchdown of the game, and that made it 21-14. So then Texas is driving, and they get down to the Ohio State 6, and Ohio State's defense, really stepped up here because Texas could have easily scored. They got to the 1-yard line, and Texas just denied them, or Ohio State denied them. So it was 3rd and 3 from the 6. There was a defensive pass interference, so that put the ball at the 2. Then there was another defensive pass interference, so that put them at the 1. They run it, don't get anything. And then they lose 7 yards on the next play. Then there was no gain. Quinn Ewers threw an incompletion. So they go for it on 4th and goal, and this is the signature play. Ewers is looking to throw it. He ends up getting sacked by Jack Sawyer, who was his roommate because they used to, be roommates at Ohio State. And he ends up returning it to the house for a touchdown, and that was pretty much it. That's pretty much how the game ended. And then Texas got the ball back, and then Ewers threw another pick, and then Ohio State was able to end it there. Will Howard had a good game, 24 of 33, 289 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Ohio State only ran the ball for 81 yards. Quinshon Junkins had 2 touchdowns in the game. Travion Henderson only 42 yards on the ground, but he was their second leading receiver. Carnell Tate was their leading receiver. He had 87 yards. Henderson had 75. Jeremiah Smith was one of their better players. 14 touchdowns on the season. He only had 1 catch for 3 yards. So he was a non-factor. Ohio State's defense, 4 sacks of Quinn Ewers, who, he put up decent numbers himself, 23 of 39, 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. They only ran the ball for 58 yards. Quinn Ewers had negative 18 yards on the ground. Jaden Blue was their leading receiver, the running back, 5 receptions for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. Matthew Golden, 2 for 51. Texas's defense, 2 sacks of Will Howard on the day. But yeah, Texas does fall short, and Ohio State, they move on. They've come a long way since that loss to Michigan. I know I've said that with their previous 2 games, but they really have come a long way because that was that left a bad taste in their mouth. They were getting criticized up and down by the media, and they have looked really good in these playoffs, and they will be taking on Notre Dame, which is an interesting matchup. Tommy, our college football podcast host, did an evaluation of the players for both teams, and who has the better talent when comparing the two, and most of it goes to Ohio State. So when you hear that, you think, all right, well, it looks like Ohio State's going to probably win this game, right? But not so fast, though, because Notre Dame, when they took on Penn State last week, Penn State, I think people probably thought they were the better team, but Notre Dame was still able to pull it out. The coach over at Notre Dame has done a great job. He's supposedly NFL teams are trying to bring him in for an interview, but I think he's content with staying with Notre Dame. But who knows? Listen, money talks. So, but it does set up. This does set up an interesting matchup. So I wouldn't count out Notre Dame in this national championship game. I think it's going to be a good game, and we'll see what happens. But right now, Ohio State is playing really well. Will Howard may have had that one mistake with the interception, but it didn't cost him anything. This was a good game. These are 2 very good teams. And we'll see what happens with Quinn Ewers. Does he end up going somewhere else to play football next year, or does he because I don't believe he declared for the NFL draft yet. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, the signature play was obviously the Sawyer run back for the touchdown. That was the difference in the game. Ohio State, they really stood tall down near the goal line to prevent Texas from scoring. Because who knows what would have happened if Texas would have scored there. But it was a very competitive game. I think really the play that, other than the Sawyer touchdown, you go back to the end of the first half where Ohio State was able to get a touchdown off of that screen pass, Henderson taking that to the house. Who knows if they don't score there, what happens, what transpires. So, yeah, no, it was a good game. Again, these two games leading up to the national championship game, very entertaining. College did better than the NFL this past weekend, in my opinion. Well, college football was like the appetizer, and then the entree was just not. Entree was not very good. It was not very good. So, we'll see what happens. The national championship game is on Monday, and we'll see how it goes. Should be a good game. Looking forward to it. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the Ohio State-Texas game. Any early predictions for the Ohio State-Notre Dame national championship game as well. Any thoughts you may have, let me know in the comments. So, before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net. That is GSMCpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about Justin Herbert and Jordan Love and their playoff performances from over the weekend. I know we went over the games yesterday, but I just wanted to get into, the criticism that these two guys, the heat that these guys have been put under now since, the weekend has happened, because there's been a lot of negative comments going towards these two guys over their performances in the postseason here. And I just wanted to get into all that, just get into that discussion and, why it's kind of an overreaction. But again, I do understand why they're receiving the criticism that they're getting at the moment. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we're going to now get into talking about Jordan Love and Justin Herbert, their struggles from this past weekend, and just the heat that they've been receiving for them. So we'll start off with, I guess we'll start off with Jordan Love. I didn't really know which one to start with, but we'll start off with Jordan Love. So he was not great. Well, both quarterbacks were not great. He threw 3 interceptions in the game on Sunday against the Eagles. It's just the Packers offense just could not really get into a rhythm. Josh Jacobs had a good game. He had that touchdown run that, gave them a touchdown finally. But, yeah, 20 of 33, 212 yards, no touchdowns, 3 picks. And, he's receiving a lot of heat for it. Did not play well. I will say that, and this goes for both of them, yes, they do deserve blame. And it's not like Jordan Love was coming in with a lot of momentum like last year, because last year Jordan Love was coming in playing as good as a quarterback as anybody else. And this year, that was not the case. They were coming in off of 2 straight losses to the Vikings and to the Bears. Jordan Love got dinged up in the game against the Bears. It's just, I didn't really like the Packers' chances going into the game. I thought they could keep it close, and they did keep it close. But the passing game really just couldn't get anything going. But the other thing, too, is, and look, I don't want to make excuses, but at a certain point in the game, he was down his top 3 wide receivers. Christian Watson was already out. Romeo Doubs gets hurt, concussion, and then Jaden Reed suffers a dislocated shoulder. Now, even when they still had Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed, they still weren't getting anything done. But you lost your top 3 wide receivers, and it's just, you're also going up against the number 1 pass defense in the Eagles as well, and you're kind of shorthanded. But the problem with that statement is, you could say, well, if Jordan Love is really that guy, he should be able to overcome it. And I understand that. But I don't think we should be overreacting when it comes to these 2 guys and say they're not it. I really don't. I think it's an overreaction. How many people really thought that the Packers were going to go into Lincoln Financial Field and beat the Eagles? Because on social media, the Eagles fans just thought they were going to walk all over the Packers. And they kind of did. I mean, well, they didn't really have to, because the Packers struggled offensively the entire game. And the tone setter was the beginning of the game when the Packers fumbled the kickoff, although it looks like Keyshawn Nixon might have recovered it. So I don't know what happened there. But yeah, that was a tone setter. Not a lot of people expected the Packers to go in there and win. And yeah, I mean, it falls to the feet of Jordan Love and the offense, and also Matt LaFleur's receiving heat as well. They got to come back and be better. And that's something, going up against these better teams, Matt LaFleur has got to answer to that, because that's something that he's kind of struggled with over the years as the coach of the Packers. Sometimes the Packers get punched in the mouth and they just don't punch back. That was during Aaron Rodgers' time. I thought last year, they really did. It looked like they had a chance to do something, because they had a chance to beat the Niners as the road team. And, one thing led to another. They ended up losing. And then going into this year, this was the year that, myself included, we were all high on Jordan Love. Jordan Love got paid a huge contract. He dealt with some injuries this year. Both players, between him and Herbert, they both dealt with injuries this year. And, they were able to overcome it, because Malik Willis stepped in, did a nice job. Jordan Love comes back. But against these better teams, they struggled. The Packers, they lost twice to the Eagles. They lost twice to the Lions. And they lost twice to the Vikings. And look, the Eagles and the Lions have the top 2 seeds. Well, the Lions have the 1, the Eagles have the 2. And the Vikings won 14 games. So for the Packers, you failed to beat those teams. Those are some of the best teams in the NFL. And you weren't able to knock them off. The Packers were barely in my top 5 when I would do my power rankings each week. I think they were maybe in it like once. But that was it. Because you go up against the Lions, you go up against the Vikings. I mean, the Eagles game was in Brazil, and I guess you can kind of throw that game out, because that game was just sloppy, even though there's a lot more points scored in that game. But, they go up against the Eagles in Philly, and they just could not move the ball against that defense. That's a credit to the Eagles' defense. The Eagles' defense is really good. But, yeah, you got to be able to beat these better teams if you want to advance, and they just couldn't do it. But I still think that Jordan Love is the guy. It's just, I think, for the Packers, and we'll talk about it in the next segment, there's some more things that they need to add to this team if they want to take that next step. And I think going to next year, if Jordan Love doesn't deal with any injuries, let's see what he does. Let's see what he does. But the Packers, they put a huge investment in him. And, he still had a relatively good year. Didn't throw as many touchdown passes, but he did throw the same amount of picks. So you want to see that be a little bit lower. Because compared to last year, he had 25 touchdowns to 11 picks this year. Last year, what did he have, 32? Oh, that was a postseason. Yeah, 32 touchdowns to 11 picks. So you want to see the touchdowns up, the interceptions down. But, yeah, I'm not... it was disappointing, but I'm not going to jump off the Jordan Love bandwagon. I'm not. I'm staying on it until otherwise. So, yeah, I get it. Didn't play well, but I think there was a lot more going on than just his performance. But also, yeah, they talked about his footwork. That didn't look... That wasn't looking good in the pocket. The interception to the linebacker, Zach Bond, he just didn't see him. The other two, one was an underthrown ball and the other one was just you're trying to get something going. That was towards the end of the game. So, yeah, I would probably... 2 of the 3 picks are his fault. I guess they all are his fault, but one of them you're just throwing it up and hoping something happens. So, but I get it. He wasn't good, but let's not say Jordan Love's not the guy. Let's see what he does next year. If next year he regresses even more, that's a problem. But we're not there yet. So I'm not ready to jump off of Jordan Love's bandwagon, and I am most certainly not jumping off of Justin Herbert's bandwagon either. I wouldn't really say I'm on their bandwagons, but still. Or my stock, selling my Justin Herbert stock and my Jordan Love stock. Justin Herbert is still a really good quarterback. The problem with him, though, Jordan Love won playoff games last year. He won a playoff game. Justin Herbert has not won a playoff game. Hasn't. Last year, Jordan Love, that was his first year starting. Justin Herbert, you are now going to be going into year 5? Year 6? Yeah. Yeah, year 6. And you still don't have a playoff game. You still don't have a playoff win yet? That's a problem. Now, it's a little bit different with Justin Herbert because, a lot of people did not expect the Chargers to make the playoffs. I thought they could be a team that finishes with 9 wins. They did, and then they got 2 more after that. And they made the playoffs against the Texans, which I thought was a game that they could win. But then you kind of saw why, people didn't expect the Chargers to make the playoffs. And this is something that they will address in the offseason. They're gonna have to add more weapons. Now, they looked good on their first drive. They went right down the field. Now, you would have liked to have seen them get 7, but they ended up only getting 3. And then after that, the Chargers just struggled to move the ball. He had that one big play to Ladd McConkey for the touchdown, but other than that, Justin Herbert was even worse than Jordan Love. He threw 4 picks. Now, some of them were not his fault, but especially the Will Dissly one, because that one just went off his hands. But, yeah, he was not great. And the Texans' defense, they got after him. They were able to put pressure on him. They just could not get anything going. They couldn't run the football either. At least for the Packers, they were able to establish something with on the ground with Josh Jacobs. But Chargers couldn't do anything. They were one-dimensional in that game, and then they were really no-dimensional. Again, Ladd McConkey had almost 200 yards receiving, but you need more than just him to step up. And they didn't have that. And the Texans' defense is pretty good. But Justin Herbert, so far, his playoff resume, he's 0-2. He was part of a collapse when the Chargers blew it against the Jaguars. And then with this game where he just did not play well. Other than the first drive and, I guess, when he threaded the needle to McConkey and McConkey did the rest. He was not great, but Justin Herbert is very talented, and you just got to surround him with more talent. And let's see what he does then next year. But, it's true, though. We just rank him with the upper echelon of quarterbacks because of the talent. but the body of work just is not there yet. And he's put together good seasons. You know, that's why people put him in that upper echelon. But how people measure you is by your playoff success, and he does not have that right now. He's 0-2. So, you got to start winning playoff games, and then people will take him more seriously. Listen, if you don't want him, I'd take him on the Giants. I'd take him and Mike Tomlin on the Giants. You know, like, I think any team that's, needs a quarterback would take Justin Herbert easily. But, yeah, I get it. I think it's just because for a lot of people, they see that, everyone's praising Herbert for things, and it's just, oh, he's overrated. Because I actually did a topic on Herbert being overrated and whether he was overrated or not. And I said no. Well, in my eyes, I don't think he's overrated. But now, when we see what happened in the postseason, maybe we got to keep him in a lower tier than the upper echelon of quarterbacks. Like, for me, Justin Herbert can be a top 5 quarterback. But got to start showing it in the postseason. And he hasn't done that. But this year, Ladd McConkey was your best weapon, a rookie. And then you have Quentin Johnston, who had his moments. He had a much better year than he did his rookie season. And J.K. Dobbins was a nice story. But they need to add more to this offense. They're just getting started. I think Harbaugh and Herbert are going to win their fair share of playoff games. Next year, they have to do that. Because, I'll come on next year if they lose again and say, well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how the season goes. But I'm not selling my stock on these two QBs. I think they could bounce back from this. The problem is we just like to overreact. That's what people are doing. They're overreacting. I mean, for Jordan Love, he had the tougher task. Like, I loved the Chargers going into this weekend. I thought they were going to win. But then, of course, when I see everybody picking the Chargers, I was like, yeah, that's not good. It's not good. And they ended up losing. So I thought the Chargers could definitely win, at least advance, into in the playoffs, at least take on the Chiefs and see what happens. But that did not happen. So, yeah, a lot of people are down on these two quarterbacks. But you know what? I think they will rise up next year. And it'll be different. I'm going to say that right here, right now. Let's see what they do in the offseason. But speaking of the offseason, speaking of these two guys, we will continue to talk about them and the other teams that lost this weekend, and we'll talk about what the losing teams have to do to get themselves back in the playoffs and to improve in 2025. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we're going to now get into talking about all of the losing teams from this past weekend in the NFL, what they have to do to improve and get themselves back into the playoffs for the 2025 season. So I guess we'll go in order. So we'll start off with the Chargers, who we just talked about. So their defense played really well this year, and you kind of figured that was what was going to happen when Jim Harbaugh took over. And then, in the draft, last year's draft, they got the best tackle, arguably, in the draft in Joe Alt. The interior offensive line, I guess, struggled a little bit against the Texans. I mean, the offensive line just struggled in general against that Texans pass rush. But for me, the main thing that the Chargers need to address, whether it is through the draft or it's free agency, they need to get more receivers, more playmakers on offense. Lad McConkey, you got a receiver there. Quinn Johnston, he could be your number 3. But you need at least another number 2, or you need a 1. Now, there's receivers out there that they can go out and get. I know T. Higgins, it's like every team is connected to him. I remember seeing something about Chris Godwin. He's going to be out there. I don't know if the Buccaneers are going to bring him back. My guess is no, but we'll see. Receiver is what they need to address, and they are going to do that. And maybe they bring Keenan Allen back, because Keenan Allen said he either wants to play in L.A. or go back to the Bears. So I think if you brought Keenan Allen back, that would be good, because him and Herbert have a chemistry. They have a connection. So I think that would be a good move there. But, that is what I think you need to go out and get more playmakers. Because you saw in the playoff game against the Texans, again, Herbert was not great, but who stepped up other than Lad McConkey? No one. They couldn't run the ball. Quinn Johnston dropped some passes. It was not great. It's Lad McConkey. You need to add more. So, get another back that can complement J.K. Dobbins. Like, I know you have Gus Edwards there and Kamani Vidal, but I think you need someone else in that running back room to complement Dobbins, because you also can't rely on Dobbins to stay healthy a whole year. I mean, look, he had a great year, but he also missed time towards the end. He was able to make it back, for the last couple games and the playoff game on Saturday, but can't rely on him to stay healthy a whole season. They need to address that as well. So we'll see what they do. But the Chargers are heading in the right direction, and they will be back in this spot next year. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Chargers. Then we move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So kind of similar is offense. But the difference between them and the Chargers is the Chargers have their quarterback. The Steelers do not have their quarterback in the future. And I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback next year. Are they going to bring back Russ? Are they going to bring back Fields? Are they going to bring back both of them? Are they going to go out and get somebody else? Are they going to draft someone? What are they going to do? I have no idea. But quarterback is something that they need to improve. Because if they, like I talked about in the beginning of the show, if they want to compete with the elite teams in the AFC, just talking about the AFC, they need to improve the quarterback position. The other thing, too, is maybe you go and get a different coordinator. Because I know people are not happy with Arthur Smith as well. Now, was he better than Matt Canada? Yeah, I guess. But coordinator change has come up once again. So we'll see if they end up doing that, which I don't know. But the other thing, too, is same thing with the Chargers. You got to get more playmakers on this offense. They're probably not bringing back Najee Harris. You traded for Mike Williams, and he barely made an impact on the team. So what was the point of that? And also, speaking of receivers, so Deontay Johnson got waived by the Texans. So he went from the Steelers to the Panthers, then to the Ravens, and then to the Texans, and now he's just not on the team. So who knows what's going to happen with him now that the Texans let him go. But I wanted to bring that up. Maybe you bring him back. Maybe you try to patch things up with Deontay Johnson. I don't know, and vice versa. Maybe he tries to patch up things with them. Yeah, they need to add more receivers to this team, and let's see what they do with the running back position, because it doesn't look like Najee Harris is going to come back. So you got Jaylen Warren. Well, they got to bring somebody else in. Now, maybe they could have. If they didn't have Najee Harris, maybe they could have went out and tried to get one of the free agent running backs from, the last offseason. Because, they're still in the playoffs. Well, Josh Jacobs got eliminated, but you still got Barkley, you still got Derrick Henry, you still got Joe Mixon, who was traded. The running back position has... those guys put respect back on the running back position from the seasons that they all had. But yeah, I think the Steelers, if they do address the running back position, I feel like it's going to be through the draft. That's just me, though. But yeah, it's all offense when it comes to the Steelers. And maybe you go out and try to get, another pass rusher too, because, this defense is also getting older. Like, the defense is still pretty good, but TJ Watt's not getting any younger. Cam Hayward is getting older. You gotta add some more youth on that defense as well. That's just me, though. They did that with the offensive line, which I think, with the young players, hopefully they develop and, they play better. But, I think the defense needs some more youth there. That's just me. But, so that's the Steelers, and then we move on to the Broncos. Yeah, I feel like for most of these teams, it's offense. Same thing with the Broncos. You need more than just Cortland Sutton. Well, Troy Franklin had that long touchdown reception. Marvin Mims, he was good down the stretch. I think running back is a position that they need to address coming up here because they just could not run the ball in the game against the Bills. They were using different guys, but none of them really were providing the spark that they needed. But I think you need to add a workhorse back to this offense. One dominant force there that you can rely upon. So that way, because like I said, if the Broncos, could have established a run in this game against the Bills, maybe it goes a little bit differently. You slow it down a bit because the Bills finally woke up and, the Broncos just could not, well, not only could they not keep up, they just could not, do anything offensively after the first drive of the game. So you need that. So whether that's through the draft, whether you bring someone in via free agency, trade, whatever, they need more help there. And like I said, add another receiver, another playmaker. There's definitely going to be receivers out there. I just gave you 2 names before. So, and the other thing too is that people are talking about is a tight end. That would really help this offense too. Because the tight ends that they have are not really dynamic. Adam Troutman, was with Sean Payton when they were with the Saints, but you need somebody else there. So that's what the Broncos need. And then we move to the middle part. Same thing with the Packers. The Packers, probably another corner because Jair Alexander might not be coming back. Maybe another pass rusher, to go along with their front four. And another receiver. They need a veteran receiver or go through the draft and get one. Because, listen, Devontae Adams talked about it when he was on with Kay Adams, and people are saying, well, Devontae should come home. And that would be nice if he does do that. I think if Rodgers does end up retiring, he should try to go back to Green Bay if he can. Or, if the Jets want to keep him, that works too, because then you can have him and Garrett Wilson. But if Devontae were to leave the Jets, if Rodgers retires, I think he should just go back to Green Bay because they need a veteran receiver and he could still play. So, So there's that. And like I said, a couple of pieces on defense for the Packers as well. But the defense improved this year. Jeff Hafley, he did a nice job for them. So, just add more talent to that defense too. Because they got some good players there. Xavier McKinney, is up there for Defensive Player of the Year. You got Rashawn Gary, but add some more players to that team, and hopefully they're back in this spot next year, which I still view them as a playoff team. And then finally, actually no, still got a couple of teams. We got the Buccaneers. So offensively, I think the Bucs are good. I think maybe, like, if they bring back Godwin, that would be good. Maybe they get another receiver in there. But I think defense. If I'm the Buccaneers, that's what I'm going for. Because you got your quarterback, you got the running backs. You have Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. When Godwin got hurt, he stepped up towards the end of the year. Cade Otton's a good tight end. I guess maybe, I don't know, there's a weakness on the offensive line. You could always address that. But I feel like for the Bucs, they need to go defensive heavy coming up because their pass defense was not good against the Commanders on Sunday, and that's what I was worried about going into the game. And also Levante David, I think, might be retiring, so that's going to leave a huge hole in your linebacking core. Maybe add to your front seven. I think defense is what the Bucs need to address this offseason. because Baker Mayfield, he played really well this year with all the adversity that they had to overcome. And, Bucky Irving had a great rookie season. Mike Evans got to 1,000 yards once again. Offense is fine. I think the defense is where you need to address certain areas. And if you do that, you're going to find yourself, in the mix again next year. And then finally, we got the Vikings. For the Vikings, it's kind of odd because, they won 14 games. But what can they do? Well, I don't know what they're going to do with the running back position because I think Aaron Jones is a free agent. You got Cam Akers there, so I guess, you address that position. You're kind of set at wide receiver. You're set at tight end. I mean, maybe offensive line. I guess maybe guys you can add in the secondary because there are some veteran guys in the secondary because Harrison Smith, I think, is a free agent. Stephon Gilmore is a free agent. So, you could address the secondary. Quarterback position, we'll see what happens with Sam Darnold, if they're going to bring him back or not. I still feel like they can, but maybe these last 2 games, they're just like, yeah, we're done. We're just going to move forward with J.J. McCarthy. Even though, yeah, you can't entirely blame Sam Darnold for these last 2 games, even though he wasn't great, because the offensive line just didn't protect him at times. I mean, 9 sacks on Monday, I mean, that's not all his fault. Some of it is, but got to protect him. They didn't do a good job of that. But yeah, that's what I think. A lot of offense when it comes to these teams. Improve the offense. I did say for the Bucs, they were the one team where I'm like, they got to go all defense or mostly defense. But everybody else got to add more playmakers, receivers, running backs. Maybe you want to improve the offensive line. The Vikings, they're the one team where it's like, well, I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. If Darnold's going to come back, if they're going to start J.J. McCarthy, they're going to keep both, whatever the case may be. But that's my thoughts there. Let me know what you guys think. What's one area that at least one of these playoff teams has to improve on so they can get back to this point next year? Let me know in the comments. So we're going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will rank the top teams going into the divisional round, top 5. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're going to now get into my top 5 teams going into the divisional round this weekend. So, again, might be a little disappointed by the top 5 because it's kind of the same. There was at least one change, at least in the order. I'm kind of giving away too much, but anyways, let's get into that right now. So at the number 5 spot, I have once again the Baltimore Ravens. Now, you might be saying that's too low. I get it. Now, all these teams that are left are the elite teams. And I've said it before, any of these teams can win the whole thing. But they are coming in, playing really well. Derrick Henry, another big game. Lamar Jackson was efficient. They got the win against the Steelers. And they will be going up against the Buffalo Bills, who they beat up on earlier this year. Derrick Henry had almost 200 yards rushing in that game. But yeah, the defense is also playing better as well because the pass defense really struggled during the season, but they've been able to figure it out. And yeah, they're playing some really good football right now. But I for some reason I didn't move them up. I kept them at 5. It's very tough right now. It's very tough right now. But 5 is still good. Like I said, this is the elite of the elite. And we'll see what happens after this weekend because things can definitely change. If, upsets happen, certain teams lose, things can change. But I got the Ravens at 5 right now. And let's see what they do this weekend when they take on the Bills. At 4, I actually moved the Eagles down. I had them in the top 3. I moved them down to 4. The offense was a little rusty, passing game at least. Jalen Hurts was not spectacular, but they didn't have to be. That's the thing. Like, people were so turned off by their performance on Sunday offensively, but it's just they didn't have to be great because their defense was great. And that's why their defense, that's kind of why I'm leaning towards, putting the Eagles ahead of the Ravens. I didn't move the Ravens up. I did move the Eagles down 1. But, the Eagles defense, look at what they did to Lamar Jackson in that offense earlier this year. They didn't really have to do too much. They benefited off of turnovers. The muffed kickoff in the beginning of the game. They immediately got 7 out of that. And they really never looked back. They had the lead the entire time. And Saquon Barkley had a quiet day for a guy that had over 100 yards rushing. Really didn't have any big runs, but they leaned on him. And that's what they're going to have to do, if they're going to want to win this whole thing. And they're already looking at him as a leader. Well, we know this already. But not only that he is a leader, but he is the leader of the team. And you know what? That doesn't surprise me because you know what? That's what he comes with. And that's, coming from a fan of the team that he left. But it's true, though. He has been a difference maker for this team. And that combined with the defense, this is a team that is very, very dangerous. And they can win the whole thing. Now, I think they're going to have to play better offensively on Sunday if they're going to want to take down the Rams because the Rams are coming in hot off of the win against the Vikings. So, Jalen Hurts in that passing game is going to have to step up. They're going to have to make plays because that Rams defense is playing better. Now, oddly enough, this picture comes from the game against the Rams where Barkley ran for over 200 yards. But I don't see that happening again. I think, the Rams, they're going to be more prepared for this game, and it's going to definitely be a little bit closer. But it's going to be tough for the Rams because now that offense is going to have to go up against the Eagles' defense, which is really good. So, yeah, I got the Eagles at 4. Again, the offense was not overly impressive on Sunday, but it didn't have to be. A.J. Brown only had 1 catch for 11 yards, But, again, they didn't need to be because the Packers just couldn't get anything going. At 3, I got the Bills. What a way that game started. Broncos go right down the field. Bo Nix connects with Troy Franklin for the touchdown, and you're thinking, oh, no, that's not good. But the Bills locked in the rest of the game. And Josh Allen had another solid playoff performance. And, they got their sets set higher. Same thing with the team they're going to be playing with on Sunday. There is so much on the line in that game. It's not even funny. Because I said going into the playoffs, those are the 2 quarterbacks that probably have the most pressure to do something. And they're going to be playing each other. So whoever wins, it's huge for them. But whoever loses, they are going to get torn apart. I really cannot wait for that game. I want it to be Sunday already, even though the game's going to go really fast. All the games go really fast. But, yeah, Josh Allen was solid once again. The defense played really well for the Bills. And they're playing well at the right time, because, and the other thing too is people thought Denver was going to keep it close. People thought there was a chance that Denver could upset them. I said that game was the game I was most intrigued by, but it ended up being a blowout. And, Josh Allen is spreading the ball around. It's not one guy that he's going to. He's spreading it around. Curtis Samuel had a good day. Khalil Shakir's had a good year. Keon Coleman caught the 2-point conversion. James Cook had a big day. Ty Johnson caught that touchdown in the back of the end zone. They got 2 good tight ends. You got Amari Cooper as well, who didn't really do much, but still you got him on the team. It's a plus. We'll see what happens on Sunday now when they take on the Ravens. It's going to be different. It's going to be a different kind of game because now it's in Buffalo. And the Bills, I think, are a better team than they were when they matched up earlier in the season. So I got them at 3. And then at number 2, got the Detroit Lions. They will be taking on the Commanders this weekend, getting a little bit healthier. They're going to be getting David Montgomery back. And, yeah, this has been arguably the best team all year. Jared Goff put together another great season. Jameson Williams stepped up this year. That was one guy that I was looking at as a guy that was going to potentially take that next step, and he did. Had over 1,000 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best receivers in the NFL. He had another big year. A good tight end, Sam Laporta. That defense, listen, they played well against the Vikings, and they really needed that bye, and that bye really is going to help them. But it sets up an interesting matchup with the Commanders now. I'm curious to see how that game plays out. But they really needed that bye week. They had an earlier bye week this year. It was week 5. So hopefully they get some more guys back and they're ready to roll on Saturday. That's the late game on Saturday. So looking forward to that. But yeah, they're going to start getting guys back and they're going to be almost whole. So yeah, I got them at 2. And then at number 1, no surprise, Kansas City Chiefs. And it's been a long time since we saw Patrick Mahomes and the starters play. Last time they played was on Christmas, which is almost a month ago. So they'll be playing on Saturday for the first time in a while. But you know what? It doesn't matter. It's the Chiefs. They can handle any kind of circumstances that they deal with. And, I mean, they could have played their starters last week. They didn't. But they're going to be ready to roll for this playoff game against the Texans. I fully expect them to win this game. I would be surprised if they don't, even though I always say nothing surprises me. But I expect them to win this game and get to the AFC Championship game and host it once again. Patrick Mahomes, his numbers in the divisional round, I wanted to bring this up because I saw this stat. I think it was it CBS that posted it? Yeah, CBS's Instagram. Patrick Mahomes' career in the divisional round. 6-0, 1,813 total yards, 16 total touchdowns, no interceptions, a completion percentage of 70.4, and then a passer rating of 115.8. Guy retires now, he first ballot Hall of Famer, easily. But that's what he does. He does not lose in the divisional round. And, I think that's going to remain the same here. So, yeah, to kind of run through the top 5 once again. 5, I got the Ravens. 4, the Eagles. 3, the Bills. 2, the Lions. And then 1, I have the Chiefs. Let me know what you guys think about these rankings. What would your rankings be? Let me know in the comments. We'll see what happens this weekend. We will see what happens this weekend. Because when we get down to just 4 teams, I'm just going to do a top 4. But, yeah, it should be a fun weekend. Hopefully the games are better than last week or this past week. But we will preview all of them on Friday. And actually, I just wanted to bring up something. A player that we talked about before. Some breaking news there. So, yeah, we haven't used that in a while. So, we talked about Quinn Ewers and whether or not, he's going to go play somewhere else next year. So, it seems that he is declaring for the NFL draft. His agent told ESPN he ends his career at Texas. He went 21-5 as a starter. And, so he is going to enter the NFL draft. So, that's another option for teams that might need a quarterback. We'll see where, the draft experts have him going, where his projection is. But that was made official. One of my friends sent that in our sports chat. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Like I said, Friday we will preview all the games, including the national championship game, because I will not be doing a show on Monday. So I'm going to preview the national championship game on Friday. But we will be back Tuesday through Friday of next week. But yeah, show tomorrow, show Friday, just no show Monday. And then we'll be back rocking and rolling Tuesday through Friday, and then business as usual from there. So yeah, listen, we're winding down here. College football is almost over, and then the NFL will soon be over after that. Tomorrow, some topics I've come up with. There's some head coaching searches. Teams still looking for head coaches. I wanted to get into. Some more Mike McCarthy stuff. Potential Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers reunion, maybe. Might talk about that tomorrow. Also wanted to get into the All Pros, what players made first team All Pro, stuff like that. That'll all be covered tomorrow. So make sure to check it out, tune in, and like I said, check out all the other shows. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.